All right. So push factors and pull factors is the first thing we need to talk about. So push factors are the reasons people leave a country. So this is stuff like war, famine, persecution, generally bad stuff. So that is your push factor. A pull factor is a reason people want to go to a country. So maybe they find gold, what happened in California. Maybe there's jobs, maybe there's religious freedom, maybe their husband or wife is in that country. Generally it's good stuff. So push factors is why you leave, pull factors is why you come to a country. One pushes you out, one pulls you in. Pretty straightforward. So that's going to take us to America. And what's America built on? Slavery. So we're going to go into a little bit of story time because we're going to talk a lot about immigration right now. So here's the story all about how. So when colonists first settled, and they settled at Jamestown, and they started to build, a lot of the first southern plantations and a lot of the first slaves, they ended up attacking Native American tribes and forcing them to be slaves. So the first slaves are Native Americans. The problem is they died really easily because of disease. So they died very easily, disease, being mistreated. Generally, they did not last very long. So the slave owners say, okay, we need someone else. And that brings us to indentured servants, which we are going to have our entire lesson about. Indentured servants are like, they take poor white people from Europe. They want to leave Europe because they're poor. They want to come to America because there's opportunity, but getting over on the boat from Europe to America is expensive. So basically what would happen is someone would pay for that poor person's ship to the United States. And in response to that, that poor person would work 7 years in the United States to pay off that boat trip, and then they'd be free. So it's like a temporary white slave, you can think. That's how I described it last year. Indentured servants as like temporary white slaves. But after that failed, they resorted to the African slave trade, which is what we're going to be talking a lot about later this year. So this is kind of like how we got to that point. So it starts with Native American slaves. That's the first image right there. Indentured servants, where they are bound to their employers as like temporary slaves in exchange for the free ship to the New World. And then that would lead to African slave trade once indentured servants failed. Okay, so what are indentured servants? This is the term you haven't heard before. So here's the reason this happens. The colonies needed people really, really badly. They didn't have enough people, and most importantly, they didn't have enough field hands to work in the farms. And they didn't have enough field hands that knew what they were doing. So they needed people to work really badly after the Native American slaves all started dying from disease. So they told them, hey, poor people in Europe, come to America. You'll work for a master for 7 years, and then you'll get to own your own plot of land that you get to own for the rest of your life, and you'll be free. And then what happened in the New World in America was what I like to call triple Ds, disease, death, and decapitation. No, they weren't actually decapitated, but there was a lot of death, which is the only second best triple Ds. The best triple Ds is diners, drive-ins, and dives with Guy Fieri. Anyway, the indentured servants, they got to America, and they ended up having a lot of unfulfilled promises. What this means is like, hey, you were supposed to treat us well for and we worked for you for 7 years, and then we get our own land. Problem is, a lot of these indentured servants were not getting the land they were promised after this was over. So long story short, colonies need help. Guy Fieri, death, disease, decapitation. A lot of them died once they were here. And then you lied to me. They were not given what they were promised. Which leads us to Bacon's Rebellion. The guy's name is Nathaniel Bacon, but I like a strip of bacon better because it's more fun and it's delicious. So basically, hey, you guys said you'd defend us from Native Americans. and also give us land after 7 years, and neither of those two things are happening. What's up? And the rich landowners are like, oh yeah, no, for sure, we got you. And then they ignored everything and did nothing to protect them. So Bacon comes back and he says, this is whack. We keep getting attacked by natives. We're not getting the land we're promised. You have 2 weeks to fix this or we're gonna burn everything down. 2 weeks later, they burn everything down. Huge revolt happens from Nathaniel Bacon. And they burn down the governor's office of Virginia. So, hey, violence destroying property, American tradition, gotta love it. Long story short, Nathaniel Bacon dies, whole thing comes to an end, and then why do we care? Why should we care about this? The reason we care about this is because it leads to African slavery. The reason it leads to African slavery is because indentured servants were expensive, number one. You have to pay for their trip across the Atlantic Ocean, and then if they didn't always survive. So you're paying, it's a lot of wasted money. Second of all, you're losing land. Bacon's Rebellion also showed how dangerous having poor, how dangerous it was for rich landowners to not be in good graces with poor whites in the new America. So a lot of these rich landowners, those monopoly men we had earlier on, these guys became very scared of angering poor whites in the new America and making them be the workers. So what they did is when you have African slavery and you made slavery racial and you included racism into this conversation, it stopped poor whites from being the, quote, lowest in the caste. So you basically add another element to this little pyramid so that, poor whites, they still have land, they're still struggling, but at least they can say to themselves, well, we're not at least the lowest. And then they won't revolt and attack the rich landowners. A lot of the social hierarchy, the social pyramids in the South are based around rich white landowners keeping power and controlling poor whites. So this is like one of the ways that it led to African slavery, is because you wanted to add this extra ring at the bottom. Also, it was cheaper. Okay, we did that. So here's your guys' assignment. We're gonna focus really on this idea of immigration. So it's gonna be all about indentured servants and modern immigrants. So the big question is, why would people make such a dangerous journey to the United States? Let me stop this recording.